Hello there, you beautiful people, and welcome to this lecture on keyword arguments and default parameters for functions. So we first can have a quick discussion of what a function parameter is, and also what the difference is between function parameters and function arguments. This is a problem known to keep many people in the programming community up at night, but it's rather simple really. After that, we're going to learn how to use keyword arguments and also how to use default parameters so that we can make our functions much more flexible to use. And by the end of this lecture, you're going to know the difference between a function argument and a function parameter, which is always good at parties, and you're going to be able to give your functions default values. So let's get into it. So let's go ahead and make a function that's going to tell us about someone. We're going to use the def keyword, which is short for define. Our function is going to be called about, and we're going to give it three parameters. We're going to give them the person's name, their age, and their likes. Okay. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to have a local variable called sentence, and we're going to say meet blank. They are blank years old, and they like blank. And we're going to format in there their name, their age, and their likes. Okay, awesome. And we just want to return that sentence. Okay, so to call this function, we'd use about, and let's say we're going to say the person's name is Jack, they're 23, and they like Python. And we're going to say it says meet Jack, they're 23 years old, and they like Python. Brilliant. So here we can clearly see the difference between a function argument and a function parameter. The parameter is what we use in the function definition. So the parameters in this case would be name, age, and likes. Those would be our parameters. But the arguments are what we actually pass to the function, or what we give to the function when we call it. So here our arguments are Jack, 23, and Python. The argument Jack matches to the parameter name. The argument 23 matches to the parameter age. And the argument Python matches to the parameter likes. And the reason it does that is because we type them in a specific order. But we can enter our arguments in any order we like, as long as we make it clear which parameter they associate with. And when we do that, they become keyword arguments. So let me show you what I mean. Instead of typing it like this, which requires every one of them to be in the correct order, what we could do is we could say age equals 23, comma, name equals Jack, comma, what was the other one? Likes equals Python. And when I run that, it's going to give us exactly the same thing, but you can see we've got some flexibility in the order. These are keyword arguments because each argument is associated with a keyword which matches the parameter in the function definition. Now this is all fine, but what if we didn't want to give a specific value, but we still wanted the function to work? I mean, maybe we didn't know what the person liked, for example, but we knew their name and age. I might be able to change the order, but at the moment I have to enter three arguments. If I didn't, let's say I just took out their likes like that, and I just tried to type in Jack23, we're going to get an error, and it's going to say the about function is missing one required positional argument, and it's missing likes. By the way, when I said that these things have to be in a certain order, those are called positional arguments. When we give them the keyword, they're called keyword arguments. They're basically the same thing, it's just one has more flexibility than the other. So how can we actually make this function run without having to give the likes? But we still want to be able to do something with it, right? We still want to be able to process the likes if we've got that information, but if not, we still want the function to run. Well, to do this, we have to give the function, we have to give the likes parameter a default value. So if we don't give the function what that person likes, it's going to default to another value. Okay, and the way that we can do this is I'm going to take my function definition down here, and what we do is in this function definition, under the one that you want to give a default value, you use a equals sign, and let's say by default that person is going to, everyone that uses this function is going to like Python, because who doesn't like Python, right? So that is going to set the likes value by default to be Python. So now when I use about, I can type Jack, and his age is going to be 23. And by default, you can see, meet Jack. They are 23 years old and they like Python, even though I didn't enter it. But if I do enter it, let's say they like football, which is a lot more realistic, isn't it? If I do that, meet Jack, they're 23 years old and they like football. So now we have a lot of flexibility. We can enter that value or not. But there's something rather important to know when you're dealing with default values. Default parameters must go at the end. Okay, so for example, I couldn't, when I was defining the thing, I couldn't say name equals, let's say by default their name is Jack, and then after it I just have these two ones without default values. No, I'd have to put age, then likes, and then put the name. Okay, I'd have to do it like that. Your parameters with default values have to go last. So I'm just going to put that to the way that it was before. And I can have as many default parameters as I want. Obviously, I could have, let's say, okay, they like Python. Let's say I had hair color, right? I could set that to a default value there, and you can have as many of those as you want, but as long as your default values come last. So just bear that in mind. So watch this as well. If what I can do is, if I gave all of them default values, let's say the default name was Ziad, the default age was 23, and the default likes was Python. Okay, so let me define that function again. Now I can, if I want, I could say about, let's say we want Jack, he's going to be 29 and he likes football. Okay, that's going to work just fine. But if I just call about with no parameters or no arguments in this, no arguments, it's not parameters, hit with no arguments, then I can press enter and it's going to use all of the defaults. So that's quite awesome, right? Your function's going to work whether you give it information or not. This is a general case and that gives you a lot of flexibility. So you're going to want to hang on to that. And that brings us to the end of this lecture on default parameters. So let's just have a quick recap of what we've learned. We started off with a discussion of what a function parameter is and why they're different to function arguments. You learned that parameters are what are in the function definition and arguments are what you actually pass the function when you call it. After that, you saw how to use keyword arguments when passing arguments to your functions so that you can enter your arguments in any order that you like, which is opposed to positional arguments which have to be put in the correct order. You also saw that you can actually leave out certain arguments as long as you have a default parameter in your function definition, and you can have as many default parameters as you want, as long as you put those default parameters after the non-default parameters when you define the function. So like up here, likes had to go last. And there you have it. You now understand the difference between a function argument and function parameters, and you can use keyword arguments and default values in your functions at will. So check you out. Now, in the next lecture, you're going to be learning techniques that will make entering arguments to functions much easier, especially when you have a lot of them. And also when your functions get a lot more complicated, this is going to come in really useful. So you're not going to want to miss this, and I'll see you in the next video.